Hey guys, we are back today with chapter 9. It's lesson 2. Today we have 4 objectives. The first one is to identify the purpose of I'm having trouble talking here, MSDS, which stands for Material Data Safety Sheet. I think the new term for that is Safety Data Sheet and SDS. Number 2 is to identify preventative measures to prevent electrical mishaps. 3 is to identify the 3 elements that have to be present for a fire to occur. And number 4 is identify what the mnemonic race means. So we deal with a lot of chemicals in healthcare. You may not realize it, but think about how much stuff needs cleaned and those kinds of things. So we have these special sheets of paper. They're called MSDSs, or Material Safety Data Sheets. Or as I said, I think the new term is just Safety Data Sheets. Now, these are not exclusive to healthcare. They are basically in any kind of working environment. So if you work at, McDonald's and you have chemicals, or you work on a job site and you have chemicals, any place that we're dealing with chemicals as an occupation, we have to have these in place so people know how to handle the chemicals. These sheets of paper tell us what's in the chemical. They tell us whether or not it's dangerous if we get exposed to them, or what can happen if we do get exposed. It tells us how to clean it up. It tells us how to store it. It tells us how to mix it, or if it can't be mixed with something. It tells us how flammable something is. So these sheets of paper give us a lot of information about the chemicals that we use on a daily basis. Do we have to memorize everything that's on them? No. But you should be familiar with the ones that you use on a day-to-day basis. And if you need to use a chemical that you're not familiar with, then you are responsible for going to the MSDS and checking it out prior to using it. Now, here in the classroom, we actually do have some MSDSs. Right now, I have they're stored up by the TV in the front of the room. They're in a red binder. Help yourself. Go ahead and look at them and check them out. All kinds of information about any kind of chemical that we have in this classroom. Everything from the dry erase liquid that's in the dry erase wipes, to hand sanitizer, to the cleaning equipment or cleaning chemicals that we use. So go ahead, check them out. There's lots of information. You can see how they're laid out and that kind of thing. So that's one safety risk that we have. Remember, chapter 9 is all about safety. So we talked about lifting and how that's a safety issue. We talked about chemicals and how that's a safety issue because we don't want a chemical burn or something like that to happen from us being injured from improper chemical use. But electrical equipment also plays a risk for us as healthcare workers, because electrical problems can come from frayed wires, loose plugs, or electrical appliances that are not safe. So we have to make sure that we take certain precautions to prevent fires and electrical shocks from happening. So first of all, we should use grounded appliances. So when I say grounded, what I actually mean is the electrical cords that have the 3 prongs, or the 3 prongs. If a cord has 3 prongs and one of them is missing, you can't just assume that it's okay and use it. It actually cannot be used. And it's what that bottom wire does is it kind of gathers up any loose electrical current, kind of gathers it into the electrical socket so that we don't have any extra electrical current that could harm us outside of the electrical outlet. We have safety outlets in a hospital setting. A lot of times the ones that I've seen in the hospitals I've worked at and or visited, they're red, where the red ones are plugged in for generator use, so that if the electricity does go out, that they would still work. The other thing that you might see are the safety ones that like you might see in your bathroom, that if the water kind of gets mixed in with them in any way, it kind of has an emergency shut off, again, to prevent an electric shock. In a hospital setting, you will never find us using extension cords. They are unsafe. People can trip over them and stuff. So you will not see us using an electric or extension cord. If on a rare occasion you do, it will be taped down. But because they are such a hazard, you will more than likely not see extension cords used in a hospital type setting. And of course, the other kind of rule that they point out with the electrical equipment is that you should not mix the electrical equipment with water and bathtubs and showers. So, if your patient is on some kind of medical equipment that needs plugged in and they need their shower or their bath, you probably need to disconnect that. And it might not be that you disconnect it. It could be that the nurse does or what have you, but it needs disconnected before taking the patient in to get their shower. Another risk or safety hazard that we can face is fires. Think about how scary a fire would be if you were a patient, or even as a healthcare worker, having to get all those patients out safely that you're responsible for. So keeping in mind, there's this thing called a fire triangle. And that fire triangle means that there's three things that if they are present, there is a chance that there could be a fire. The first one is fuel. Now, not necessarily fuel like you put in a car. What I mean by fuel is anything that is flammable. So it could be fuel, it could be cloth, it could be paper, it could be lumber, it could be oil or grease, cooking oil or grease, it could be nail polish remover. All of these types of things we have in a healthcare setting, and they're all flammable. The second item, if you will, that is in the fire triangle is oxygen. Now, we have oxygen in the air we breathe, but we also have oxygen being pumped into patient rooms, and it's concentrated oxygen, and it makes it highly flammable. So anytime you have fuel, oxygen, and the third item, which is heat or heat source, whether it's a spark from an electric appliance, a flame, or some kind of candle or lighted material, anytime you have all three of those items present, there is a risk for a fire. So it could be as far as in a healthcare setting, fuel, you could have cloth, like bed linens, clothes, mattresses, paper in the charts, cooking oil in the kitchen, gasoline in the maintenance department, nail polish remover in the patient areas, the building itself because of its materials. You can have heat that's provided by electrical activity if somebody smokes against the rules. And remember, smoking is not allowed in most places because it is such a hazard in a healthcare setting. Candles. Sometimes people forget that you can't light candles in a hospital setting either. It could be the stove in the kitchen. It could be a number of places. Oxygen, again, in the air we breathe, are being piped in. So there is always a chance that there could be a fire present in a healthcare setting, just because we typically have those three sources or three items that can form a fire triangle. So when they are all three present, they can create a fire. So you have to be prepared and be ready. If a fire were to occur, what we would need to remember is the mnemonic race. No, that doesn't mean we're going to go flying out of the hospital and run out and leave our patients behind. What RACE stands for is the R stands for removing the people who are in immediate danger. So if you walk by a room and you see there's a fire in there, the patient needs to get out of there first before you do anything else. So if somebody is near a fire or what have you, rescue them first if you can. The A stands for activating the alarm. When you work in a hospital or other healthcare setting, you're responsible for knowing where all the pull stations are in your work area so that you can activate the fire alarm if you need to. You also are responsible for knowing where all the fire extinguishers are, because the next step is to contain the fire. So that would mean closing the doors and windows, trying to keep the fire isolated to whatever area it might be in. And then the E has actually two meanings. It could mean that you extinguish the fire with that fire extinguisher that I talked about, or it could mean that you evacuate the building. Now, typically in larger scale buildings, that's done differently, but typically we'll do a horizontal evacuation first. So meaning, if we pretend that this school is a hospital, and we pretend that this hallway is one unit of the hospital, the next hallway over is another. If there's a fire in our unit, we would try to move our patients over to the unit next door. And there's usually fire-proof doors that are rated for a certain amount of time that they can withstand fire between. But if it's getting close to that time or we're being given the order, then we would evacuate out, which is the vertical evacuation. Now, each hospital does this differently. So you have to follow whatever hospital policies there are in place. You're responsible for knowing them. At one hospital I worked at, whatever floor you were at, you were given a designated parking structure number to evacuate to. So for instance, like, you know, when you go to Hershey Park and you look up and you see the big numbers on the light poles, and like, all right, so it might be that this unit goes to light pole number 1 and this one goes to light pole number 2, and then you are responsible for making sure that all your patients there and whatnot. So a couple other things with the evacuations. First of all, we're going to evacuate the patients that are ambulatory first, which means that they can walk on their own. So that seems kind of backwards to some people, but that is who we evacuate first. We'll line them all up, have them each put their hand on the shoulder of the person in front of them, put a nurse in the front and a nurse in back, and tell them they're not allowed to let go. And then anybody who can walk, so whether it's a patient, a visitor, what have you, we get out of there first and we go to our assigned area. The next people that come out are the people who can maybe partially help you. They only need a little bit of help, so that's who we get out next. The last people to come out are the people who need total help, that you might need more than one person to help get out of the hospital or the healthcare facility. And it might be that, like, you wait till the firemen come or what have you, but those are the people who go last. And there's ways to evacuate. I'll have to show you and demonstrate. Like, there's ways to put a patient in the bed and roll the blanket up and take them out in the blanket. There's ways to do fireman carries where 2 people can carry a person, and things like that that we use to evacuate people. The last time I was at Chambersburg Hospital, they had this new thing that I've never seen used or anything like that, but it was like the sling that was in the stairwell that you put your patient on, and you hooked it onto the railing, the hand railing, and you slid your patient down that way in this like sling thing. So there's a number of different ways, and it depends on where you're at. If you're in the nursery, the scary thing that you may think about, you have 10 babies there and you're by yourself or with two of you. How you get 10 babies out and you only have 2 hands? They actually have a plan for something like that. They have a baby evacuation shirt. I don't know what this technical name is, but they have slots, and you like literally put the babies down in these slots. There's some in the back, and then you walk down with these babies in these slots. Sounds scary to me. Glad I never had to do that. But a couple other things, when you go to evacuate, again, follow your hospital policies. It was different. One hospital I worked at, after we evacuated a room, we would throw a pillow down in front of the door. Another place that I worked had chalk at the nurse's station, and we evacuated a room. We would use the chalk and put an X over it. When you're evacuating, if you go to touch a door handle and it is hot, you should never open that door, even if you know somebody's on the other side of that door. And that's the sad part. You could know that somebody's in there. But if you open that door, you could cause an explosion or a backdraft, or an even bigger problem. You could become injured, and then the fire company would not only have to rescue the person that's in there, but they'd also have to rescue you as well. So if the door handle's hot, leave it be. Don't open it. Of course, if there's smoke, your best bet is to get down on your hands and knees and crawl, because the smoke rises. So those basic things that you may have learned from the fire company when you were little, they still apply. But yeah, so there's lots of ways that we have to get people out during safety things and fires and things, and it can be scary. The thing that you should remember is that there's always going to be someone in charge. And if you run out of ideas or you don't know what to do, then you go to that person in charge and they will tell you what to do. But other than that, that is how we evacuate for fires. So tomorrow we will actually finish up chapter 9, and we'll get moving on then with chapter 10 after we finish chapter 9. But if you have any questions, shoot me an email and I'll get back to you. See you guys tomorrow.